Hello and welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. It is a book club episode, and I have a really fun historical biography for you to dive into this summer. And this book is so great because you can take up sections, you can take up chunks, you can read the whole thing cover to cover and be completely satisfied and filled with knowledge on the greatest American. Now, who do you think that would be? For me, hearing the title of that book, I would say maybe Ulysses S. Grant or my grandfather. But no, the greatest American is Benjamin Franklin, according to one of his direct descendants, Mark Skousen. For those of you who have ever attended Freedom Fest, you can thank Dr. Skousen for that honor because he is the founder of Freedom Fest. He is an economist. He is a professor. He is a best-selling author. And he is deeply obsessed with Benjamin Franklin, and rightly so. The subtitle, Benjamin Franklin, the world's most versatile genius. Not light words, written by one of the greatest thinkers I know, Mark Skousen. Welcome to Kennedy Saves the World.
Thank you. You said I was obsessed with Franklin. I should tell you, Franklin was famous for saying, "He that boasts of his ancestors does but advertise his own insignificance."
That's very interesting because, the fact that you are a direct descendant and you have studied Benjamin Franklin your entire life. You and your wife actually completed his autobiography in 2006, the latter years of his life where he wasn't writing as much. Does he still continue to fascinate you?
Well, I think he's endlessly fascinating. There's no question about that. And I see so many opportunities in today's world where you could apply what Franklin learned 200 and some years ago. I think he's a pretty fascinating person. And, I wondered, could you call him the greatest American? Well, I came up with 22 careers that he had as a printer, a publisher, a diplomat, postmaster general, humorist, inventor. The list goes on and on. So no matter what the situation is, I've looked at all of the issues of today, and probably the only issue that I can't find anything that Franklin wrote about was the transgender issue. But other than that,
no, I think he liked the traditional version of the woman.
Yes.
Who used she, her pronouns.
Yes.
I didn't know what a prolific lover he was until I read your book.
Yeah, and in fact, that one chapter, 77, about the hard-to-govern passions of Ben Franklin was one of my favorite articles that I wrote. Actually, this book is not a regular biography. There's been many good biographies already written on Franklin, Walter Isaacson, H.W. Brands, and so forth. Mine is, as you say, 80 short chapters on Franklin's various aspects of his life. And I originally wrote these columns for Newsmax magazine. They have a newsletter called the Franklin Prosperity Report. And the one chapter, the one column they rejected, and he said, "No, we can't publish this," was, guess what? On Franklin's sex, his views about sex and women. And there's always been this debate, was he a ladies' man or was he a womanizer? And there's this salacious nature.
What's the difference? So what is a ladies' man just someone who is a flirt, and a womanizer is someone who uses women and discards them?
Yeah, I think you could make that distinction. And Franklin still, despite his diplomatic skills, he still had a lot of enemies. And John and Abigail Adams thought he was definitely a womanizer. And
Abigail in particular. Abigail was just grossed out by Benjamin Franklin's flirtatiousness that she witnessed at a dinner in France.
Even though Franklin was a widower at the time, he was single. But they did not like them putting their arms around him and kissing him and stuff like that, especially in public. The Adams were very puritanical. There's no question about that. but but Franklin was known to he confesses his hard to govern passions and his errata in life, his errata, if you will. He did have, however, the history does show that he only had one illegitimate child, not numerous illegitimate children, but he had 3 generations. His son had an illegitimate child, his grandson had an illegitimate child, and even my ancestor through Lewis Bates Jr. is an illegitimate child of Franklin. So there was a whole series of hard to govern passions by the Franklin family.
Well, there are, we can't always choose our genetic code. But it was interesting because Franklin, as you write, didn't shy away from it. And he tried to counsel young men on the ways, first he was like, if you have high sex drive, just get married. It is the natural state of things. It's the smartest thing you can do. You will have a partner in love and in life. And, it wasn't like he was counseling young men to be a bunch of horn dog libertines. But then he gives some pretty frank advice on how to choose a mistress.
Yes, it was an anonymous pamphlet. He did not reveal his name, but 100 years later, they put his name on it because they knew he had written it. And he basically said, listen, if you can't get married, then if you're going to choose a mistress, choose an older lady because they're experienced and they will appreciate having sex again. So,
and he said they're better conversationalists.
Yeah.
And in the dark, all cats are gray.
Yes, these are great lines that I reveal in the book, and you can see why a conservative organization like Newsmax decided to censor this column that I wrote, but it's in the book, chapter 77. But I would also go beyond that to say that Franklin wasn't just seeing women as sexual objects. The salons that the women ran in France were intellectual, and there were great debates on the topics of the day. And Franklin was very much accepting of that and appreciated the intelligence of women. So he's definitely the most modern of the founders. He went from being a slave owner, small number of servants, if you will, to an abolitionist. Mm-hmm. He changed he was very skeptical about religion, and at the end of his life, he saw that God had governed in the affairs of men and interfered so that the Americans would win the revolution against the mightiest military power in the world. I really admire Franklin for constantly willing to change his mind on various topics, and there's a lot to, that's a good lesson to learn in life. Do you want to just be your own, or do you never change your views? You always have a certain way of perspective, or you're like Franklin, where you hear new evidence and you say, maybe I need to change my mind. We need more of that today.
And you point that out throughout the book, and that's really fascinating, and that seems to be what follows from living a long life. When you die after, well into your 9th decade, you are more likely, if you are as philosophically and intellectually as engaged as he was, you're more likely to come face to face with facts that challenge your own positions. And there is something very respectable about that. But you also sort of take apart the arguments against him from, people I'm sure you respect, like Murray Rothbard, who had a few major issues with Franklin.
Yeah, Murray Rothbard wrote this book called Conceived in Liberty, and it's a 4-volume, 5-volume set, the history of America from his perspective. And I think he was I don't think he was a very good historian, to be honest with you. There's a lot of detail there, but he misses a lot of the big picture. I mean, he considers George Washington a terrible general because he lost all of these wars, but he completely ignores the big wars, the important ones that he won that turned the tide of the country. And he calls Franklin an opportunist, a lecher. I mean, he has all of these extremely negative terms, overbloated ego, et cetera, et cetera. And the evidence just does not support it. There's no other historian that I know of who thinks that General Charles Lee, should have replaced George Washington. Charles Lee was a complainer. He did not work with other people. He was never successful. He was actually arrested early and never did really fight much of a war and stuff like that. But, I mean, I don't understand. Sometimes Murray just goes off the deep end. As an economist, he's a great economist, and I learned a lot from him. He was my mentor in many ways when it comes to economics. But his views on politics and history really go astray from what most historians think are critical. So I have this chapter 80. This is the final chapter of the book, called Ben Franklin and His Critics. And I go through all of the critics, the arguments about his womanizing, about his politics, his opportunism, his crony capitalism. He's an inflationist. But, there's another example on inflation. When the British prohibited gold and silver as coin in the colonies, that they couldn't mint their own gold and silver, he favored fiat money, paper money schedule. And he said, in modest amounts, it's very positive for the economy. But at the end of his life, after he saw the Continental become practically worthless and the difficulties the French had with their hyperinflation and so forth, he concluded that too much of fiat money, too much of paper money is really bad. Although he was very clever in one thing. He said, for all of you tax evaders out there who refuse to pay for this revolution to liberate our country, we're going to make you pay indirectly by depreciating the currency. That was a pretty clever line.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
I mean, but he had a lot of clever economic policies, like fund matching. So as you point out, when you raise money for a charitable organization and the idea that your employer will match that, that's from Benjamin Franklin's brain.
Yeah. So I have quite a bit about charitable giving and fundraising. I have a chapter on fundraising because Franklin was the fundraiser extraordinaire, and that's one thing I have not inherited from Ben Franklin, is the ability to raise money for everything under the sun. I was president of FEE for a year and didn't work out, and I was told because I wasn't very good at fundraising. But Franklin, he tried to raise 2,000 pounds to create the first hospital in Philadelphia. He went to the legislature and said, could you fund this? And they said, no way.
No.
And they said, well, I'll tell you what, if I can raise 2,000 pounds, will you match that? Well, they didn't think he could do that. No way. So they said they agreed to that. And sure enough, Franklin raised the 2,000 pounds. And so that was the first matching fund. So he's really the father of matching funds, as well as numerous other inventions. I should mention, that Franklin, the only reason we know Franklin today is because he was America's first scientific American. And, he inventor of the lightning rod, the Franklin stove, the bifocals. I don't think your glasses are bifocals, but he did.
They are progressives.
They're progressives. Yes, it's an improvement. Franklin would love that, by the way. Franklin loved technology. He would be, of all the founding fathers, the most comfortable with all of the technology. He'd be texting. He'd have the cell phones. He'd have the HD TV. He'd be streaming. He would be doing all of these kinds of things. He loved technology. What he wouldn't like is big government and deficit spending and the national debt and the welfare system and stuff like that. But as far as the standard of living, he would love to be. And in fact, he said, I would love to have, I was born too early. I wanted to live 200 to 300 years later. And that would be now. And he would love to be alive today.
Yes, I think he would love the innovations and you pointed out, one of the questions in your quiz at the beginning of the book, which patents did Benjamin Franklin hold? And he didn't really believe in patents. And then you quote Elon Musk.
Yeah, who doesn't carry patents for the Tesla technology. There is this debate, among libertarians, to what extent is intellectual property rights, should you have patents and trademarks and stuff like that? And there are some who say yes, some who say no. And Franklin said, listen, this is for everybody, so I'm not going. He could have taken out patents on his works, and he decided not to.
And how did his family, did they prosper? Did his descendants, illegitimate and otherwise, did they prosper after his death?
No, not really. Nobody really inherited much other than property. They inherited property. He had several properties. He was never given a pension, by the way, by the federal government for all of the work that he did. Never got any additional property like some others did. He was kind of depressed about how he was treated when he came back as ambassador. But his grandson Benny was a notorious publisher, the Agora, and ran into trouble with John Adams. John Adams threatened to jail him. This is when there was a debate about free press, and so he did inherit the machinery to run printing press and stuff like that, and some land and so forth. But as the generations went down, and there were quite a few children that Sally Bates, his daughter, had. That's where most of ancestors, including myself, come from. There's really nothing that we inherited except both of us are left-handed, and few similarities there.
And intellectually curious. And lovers of economic freedom.
Well,
so
that's true.
You bring up Adams, and as you point out, Franklin got along well with Washington and Jefferson. I hope he got along with Hamilton because I love the musical. But he and Adams were kind of like mortal foes.
I'm glad you brought up Hamilton because Franklin was actually a defender of central banking and the commercial society. He was not like Jefferson, who was anti-paper money completely and so forth. Franklin's very modern in that sense. He would like the current financial arrangements in banking, big banking, and stuff like that. But with John Adams, they really disagreed pretty vehemently when they were both in Paris as commissioners. And Franklin loved the French people. The French loved him, but Adams, both John and Abigail, did not understand the French culture, did not raise a single livre, the French currency at the time. It was all Franklin who raised all the money, all the ammunition, sent two generals, French generals, Russian generals over to help the Americans, and because of that, at the Battle of Yorktown, the final battle, George Washington won. Half the troops were French, and all the uniforms were French. Half the ships were French, and a lot of people think that without the French assistance, which was all due to Franklin, not Adams, not the Lees. Arthur Lee, not Ralph Eshon. They sent a bunch of commissioners over because they didn't trust Franklin, who was 70 years old. But it turned out that Franklin did it all. He raised all the money, and then he was in charge of the Treaty of Paris. So Franklin deserves to be the grandfather of our nation for sure.
Well, that's why John Adams is not the greatest American. It is Benjamin Franklin. Mark Skousen, you can get the book now, and I hope everyone enjoys it, as I always enjoy talking to you, but especially about your latest work. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, my pleasure, Kennedy. We'll see you next year at Freedom Fest.
You know it. It's going back to Vegas, baby.
Yes, that's right. Can't wait.
All right. You're the best. Thank you so much, my friend. This has been Kennedy Saves the World, along with Mark Skousen. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app. Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.